Hey everybody, how would you like to meet and hang out with Alex Filipenko? He's the Nobel Prize winning physicist and cosmologist at UC Berkeley who discovered that the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate. Well, you can meet him and hang out with him. Coming up in our next Geo Tour, May 1st through 12th, 2025, along the Atlantic coast, West Africa to Lisbon, exploring the Canary and Madeira Islands. These are geo tours. In these tours, we always have a special guest lecture. This one is Alex Filipenko. I know Alex. He's a great guy. Super interesting intellect, great lecturer, and he is the guest lecturer on this. So you'll go to all these cool islands on a cruise ship. The way it works, because I've done a bunch of these myself, is you just don't meet the person. You get to hang out with them, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, at the bar late at night, on the little excursions to the islands and so on. And so not only are you going to see some of these great UNESCO sites at the Canary Islands there, you get to hang out with a Nobel Prize winning physicist and cosmologist and learn and talk about why is there something rather than nothing? Where did the Big Bang come from? What's the ultimate fate of the universe? How cool would that be? Check it out. Go to skeptic.com and just click on the box there for our geo tours and cruises and sign up. Could you give us some idea of what it's like to start up a company? And I think people imagine you just go to some venture capitalist and they give you $50 million and you hire your buddies and you start in a garage somewhere and then you have an IPO and you're a billionaire. How does it actually really work?
Yeah, wouldn't that be ideal? Then of course we'd all be entrepreneurs. Look, how it really works is it is tough as nails. You come up with an idea, and then you've got to get people interested. Now in Web 1, by the way, I've never taken any venture capital money in any of my social media startups. It's always been high net worth individuals, smaller family offices, things like that. But I've raised, nearly $50 million over the years, possibly more actually. But it starts with you have an idea. Sometimes you've got to back it yourself, whether you like that or not, or you get some family and friends to get behind you. You've got to hire people who will work for, sweat equity, bring them on board, build your team, make sure they can engineer properly. Listen, at the beginning of the web, the first designers I hired, you would hire the best designers, in the world in your area that you could get who were really interested. But they couldn't design pages that would load on the web, not through, as we talked, to dial-up. Now in Web 2, when I came back, I had made enough money that I basically took my retirement account and liquidated it and funded the first $500,000 myself. I was lucky to have saved that much. But, today there is no retirement account because that went first, because you've got to put your money where your mouth is. Now, some people will tell you, don't invest your own money. But I got to tell you, it's hard to raise money if you're not willing to put your own money in. So I don't really believe in that theory of, hey, don't use other people's money because then they're going to control you. They're going to dominate you. And also, they're not going to believe you. So it starts by, putting, where the rubber meets the road. You got to put your money down and make a commitment.
Right. Yeah. And can you give us some idea of how many of these startups actually succeed? Here's the back of the envelope calculation I use from David Cohen from Bessemer, who's a friend of mine. Let's say they hear 100 pitches. He's a venture capitalist. It's not quite, it applies to what you do, but the general principle here. Here, 100 pitches, they fund one to the tune of many millions of dollars. Of the 100 that they fund to the tunes of millions of dollars to get them going, maybe one makes it big, like a big IPO where the guy, the team gets their, $1 billion or whatever. So it's a real crapshoot. But what happens to all the others? Now, some go out of business, some get absorbed, some just kind of like mom and pop, they struggle along for decades and they kind of make it, but not really big.
Well, and that's interesting, right? Because first of all, the odds, just like a restaurant, almost all startups have the same odds. The odds are, 100 to 1 that you're going to get funded by somebody big, then 100 to 1 with the 100 companies that are funded by somebody big, that one of them is going to hit big, that pays for all their investments and the rest. But here's the bottom line. You got to be in the game to win. And you got to get your fingernails dirty. And if you really believe, then don't let people talk you out of it. I mean, just go for it, because the learning experience, the connections, and there's another statistic that's interesting, Michael, which is 90% of companies that are successful are not successful on their original idea.
Mm.
So this is where, you're always iterating. So don't get stuck, because there's also something called found value, which is that, you might think that you're offering the X value, a certain kind of value to the customer. You think customers are going to love you for a certain reason, but then you discover they love you for a different reason. So, you've got to really keep your mind open, and keep making sure that people can love what you do. That's another key, is people really want to love something, and you want to make sure that they can love what you do. And, so you just got to stay at it. And then if it's time to, roll up the sidewalk, then roll it up, because you've got don't be afraid. Listen, I'm going to tell you a very quick sad story. I knew a guy, in recent years. He had a great idea, and he built a startup, and he was like getting college kids to help, internet companies, to help social media companies. And you would pay him and he would pay them. And, it was a great sort of brand ambassador thing, but he wasn't making enough money fast enough, and he struggled for a long time. And you know what this guy did? And it's so sad. He had 2 kids. He killed himself
Oh, no.
because he couldn't provide for his family. So he felt like a failure. Guys, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, I use guys for everybody. There's no such thing as failure. You've got to really keep this in your mind. If it doesn't work, just, chin up. So what? You got to eat spaghetti for a while. Big effing deal. Your family will survive. Everybody will survive. You've got to wake up every day and say, it's a beautiful day, and then see what's coming at you, because that's the only way. Just keep taking action, and you'll be amazed at what unfolds.
And then what's the balance between, say, being a high risk taker and an optimist to overcome all the obstacles, but being an over optimist, I think as Danny Kahneman called it, where they're just not realistic. They should cut their losses and move on because it's not going to succeed. How do you balance that?
Michael, that's an individual choice. It's a great
Yeah.
question, everybody, because, who can measure if you're being overly optimistic, or if you're seeing, remember, the definition of an entrepreneur, one of the key points is an entrepreneur sees the future before everybody else does. Because if you don't, then you're going to have massive competition, and, you're not really an entrepreneur. Maybe you've just figured out a better way to do something. That's great. Then just do it. But you've got to decide, and really, if you can't pay the rent and you can't get anybody to put the money in, and you have a lot of data points that say this is not working, then move on. That's what you want to, you just want to move on. So, but if you really believe, stay with it, but don't stay with it to the point where you're going to get depressed if it fails. Failure is part of success. One of the most important lessons in life. How do we ever learn how to do math? By making mistakes. How do we ever learn how to hit a baseball? By missing it. And remember, baseball I love as a great metaphor, whether you play or not, because a Hall of Fame baseball player is a person who got 3 hits every 10 times they got to the plate. 7 times they failed. So, failure is part of life. Don't assign it any other meaning.
Nice. Okay, so your heuristic in this book is the different web models. One you just described of the 1990s. Web 2 is, I guess we're in Web 2 now, shifting into Web 3, and then you have Web 4 for the future. So just kind of walk us through that transition from Web 1, just one-dimensional emails, to what happened with Web 2 and the promise of it. It's going to be this utopian where we all get to be connected, to what happened to it and why.
Well, Web 1 was really more than one-dimensional. That's the great thing about Web 1. Web 1 was really exciting. And so, for the entrepreneurs, it also, gave birth to a whole new generation of entrepreneurs, because there was money. People were investing. Everybody wanted a piece of the action. And there was a new revenue model called eyeballs. Nobody was worried about cash revenue. They were worried about, can you get people to look at your site? Can you get people to sign up for your site? That was what they called the new economy, which when the bubble burst in Web 1, that's why the bubble burst. Investors got scared of, quote, the new economy, and they ran out of patience to figure out, so that, companies needed to figure out how to monetize quickly, and that wasn't the game plan. But Web 1 was really interesting and very visionary and sort of classic in its altruism, doing something good. It's like, oh my God, here's a great way to stay connected. Here's a great way to do your banking. Here's a great way to, buy your pet food. I mean, it was all about serving humanity, even with the things we do every day and with communication, social media. We call them community portals then. So Web 1 had nothing to do with data aggregation, with data, with spying, targeting, boosting content, manipulating. There was none of that. Web 1 was all about serving the people. So it's very exciting because everybody could get behind the meaning of that and come up with a great idea for how to serve another piece of our lives. It was great. Web 1 fails. Web 1 fails because, and it's classic. Economics is actually guided by emotions. So all of a sudden, the emotions of investors changed, and they needed you to have revenue right now. They didn't care about the eyeballs anymore. It was too fast. So Web 1 evaporates. Thousands of companies go out of business. Web 2 comes up shortly thereafter, and there's a new model. And Michael, you talked about this at the beginning, that I have a TED Talk on this, the rise of surveillance capitalism. Web 2, which is the Facebook, the Google model, this is where it was like a quick fix solution to making money. Oh, we've got all this data on all these people. Why, we can target them. We can manipulate their thoughts and their purchase decisions. And we can, people can pay us to target them. We can get ads to them. Then we get money when they click on them. All kinds of ways to make money, which is why Facebook today, still in Google, I mean, my God, the massive amounts of revenue they make, it's historically unprecedented. So Web 2 is the rise of surveillance capitalism. Now, Michael, here's what's interesting. At first, a lot of people thought it was kind of cool. Oh, they know that I need to go get some dog food, or they know I need to go to CVS or something. They know, how cool. There it is right there. And so at first, because it was all newfangled, it was all new, some people were like, oh, this is cool. Wow, they know what I need. This is really great. Now, what happened is it's a slippery slope. Now, in 2012, the day before Facebook went public, I was interviewed on Fox, and they asked me, what I thought about Facebook's business model. And I said, it's creepy. I said, it's
You did?
creepy.
What made you what made you think that?
Listen, I'm just writing to a friend, hey, I got to go to the store right now. I got to pick up some dog food. And then immediately, within 10 seconds, I have a dog food ad. Not just a generic dog food ad, but for the dog food that I need to get.
Well,
Now, all of a sudden, and so it wasn't just me, but people started to think, this is weird.
yeah.
Because before then, we were used to our privacy. We didn't have neighbors spying on us. Part of the great democracy of the USA is that our privacy is enshrined. But all of a sudden, we have the web, and the web starts to know everything about us and anticipates our thoughts before we do. And then, it evolved because not everybody thought it was creepy, and nobody knew what to do about it. So, we're kind of stuck. Then what happens, Michael, is what's called the network effect. The network effect is Facebook and Google and some other companies are getting so big that these startups couldn't chip in. They couldn't, they couldn't, in other words, they couldn't crack the monopoly. They couldn't get their share of the action, no matter how good they were, because they were getting boxed out. Now, fast forward to just, the last month, where the Federal Trade Commission in their antitrust case against Google has found Google guilty of serious antitrust violations and seriously boxing out competitors. And they have a case with Facebook too that I've been deposed in and I've testified in. So, what happens is these companies start to get so big that even though over 80% of people surveyed say they would change, they want their privacy back, but where do they go? All their friends are there. All their family members are there. So it becomes a catch-22. And so, this will ultimately, Michael, give rise to this conversation of, and that's Web 2, the rise of surveillance capitalism. Today, the data ecosystem is huge. I think it was a reporter for The Guardian a few years ago asked Facebook to provide him with how much data Facebook had on him. And you're allowed to make that request. They gave him 60,000 pages of data
Oh
they
my
had.
God.
So, when you think about your privacy settings on Facebook, really that's a joke. You know, Facebook, and also if you're on WhatsApp, because Facebook bought WhatsApp, which was one of the greatest encrypted privacy chat apps in the world. And Facebook found it so appealing that they could get all that data on a few billion users worldwide that they bought WhatsApp, even though WhatsApp wasn't collecting or scraping the data. But Facebook then very quickly changed their privacy policies so they could also scrape your data from WhatsApp. Now, not your conversation, that's still encrypted, but there's so much more. It's where you are, who you're talking to, what time of day it is, all this data about you that they're getting. And that just goes in their big data ecosystem with everything else they're collecting about you. It's massive. So now the era of surveillance capitalism reigns. The problem is that it's targeting minors. It's manipulating our thoughts. It allows bots and trolls and foreign countries to manipulate our democracy and to undermine it. And it's sort of like, look at the blue check on Twitter today. You can get a blue check if you're a bot or a troll. You just have to have access to a credit card. Now, of course, if you're coming in from a troll farm in Russia or China, you've got access to credit card numbers and you just put them in. Now you're blue checked. You can boost your post anywhere you want. And this is where, Michael, when we come, we'll talk about the book, The Revolutionary, Social Framework of, restoring our sanity online. We're going to talk about user ID verification. And one of the things you said, Michael, was I'm one of the world's leading privacy advocates. I've been recognized by the Canadian government. I've won awards, and I've been against any kind of national online ID system for years, well over a decade. But you know what? They already know who we are. So we can stop pretending now that our anonymity is protected. We can still protect our privacy, but we got to throw our anonymity out because it's literally killing our democracy because these bots and trolls are anonymous and we can't put a finger on them, but they can pay Twitter for a verified check. So it's time also our kids. And, any of you who have kids, or if you're, younger, let's say you're anywhere from 13 to 25 or so, you're 30, the damage. Social media is convenient and I love it. Remember, guys, I'm one of the guys who started it. I love social media. I love it for its intended purpose, to keep us connected, to keep us authentically in touch wherever we are in the world so we can find like-minded people. But I don't love boosted content. I don't love propaganda pushed into my newsfeed. I don't love that, Facebook employs thousands of psychologists to analyze how my brain works so they can manipulate it to persuade me and sell that to a marketer who can manipulate my thoughts, my political opinions, my purchase decisions, my self-image. There's all this stuff about teens and self-image on Instagram and Facebook. I mean, Michael, it's simply out of control. That's why I talk about restoring our sanity. This stuff really is insane.
Okay. Do you happen to know, before I get to the next big subject, if I turn off my cell phone, is power it off? I mean, is it still pinging and somebody knows where I am?
That's a really good question. It's my understanding that once the power is down, that it's not pinging. Now, I could be wrong about this because I haven't really looked into that carefully, but I can tell you that what's most important, because Facebook tracks us whether you're logged in or not. If you have the app on your phone, whether you're logged into it or not, and most people just keep it logged in anyhow, they're tracking wherever you are. And even if you're not a member of Facebook, there have been articles written for, gosh, I think 2016 was the first reveal by the Wall Street Journal that Facebook tracks non-members too.
Hmm.
So, if your phone is off, then you're not being tracked, but that's rather inconvenient to turn your phone off so that you're not being tracked. The idea is, first of all, this is where an iPhone is better than an Android, and I use both because, I'll use apps, and MeWe, my former company, has apps on both, and I like to monitor those. For everybody, I left MeWe 2 years ago because, the problem is bigger than MeWe can solve. There's a new team there. They're doing their own thing. But I really had to spend 2 years ideating, how do we get out of this mess? How do we, civil discourse, saving our kids, authentic communication, get rid of the bots and trolls, all these issues that we've got to fix right now. So, that's where I've been focusing. So, and I've
Yeah.
articulated the framework for it.
What happened to Super Family and Super Friends, and what does MeWe do now?
So, Super Family and Super Friends, like most social networks of that era, e-groups, e-circles, iVillage, My Family, all these, and we're all there at the same time, the Globe, Friendster, all these, it was a fascinating time. It was really a lot of fun. We all got washed out in the washout of Web 1 when even, drugstore.com and, all these places got wiped out. Because we were all following the rules. The rules of engagement with the investors are very simple. Eyeballs first. So, and that's why Super Family and Super Friends were PC Magazine top 100 sites 3 years in a row, because we were getting people. People loved it. But Web 1 washes out. And for all of you who maybe have heard the metaphor of the bubble bursting, so Web 1 was this bubble. It was just amazing. People were throwing money. We didn't need VC money. You could go to almost anybody who had money and say, here's a $100,000 check. Give me some stock. It was an amazing time. But Web 1 washes out. So that's what happens there. Now, what had me start MeWe was really an interview with Mark Zuckerberg that I watched in 2010, where he said, and it's a slight paraphrase, but really he said, privacy is a social norm of the past. I think it said something like, privacy is no longer a social norm. My jaw dropped. Now, Michael, listen, there's expressions in life, the idea of, oh, that's jaw dropping. But let me tell you, everybody, you probably had, it's the only experience in my life where my jaw actually dropped and I couldn't close it. My jaw dropped. I was like, my dad fought in the wars, right? We all have, family members who were veterans who fought for our privacy, for our freedom. And Mark Zuckerberg declares for his wallet that privacy's over because, it's not convenient for him. I was, like astounded. And I decided right then and there, flabbergasted. It's like, oh my God, I got to fix this. I got to come back. And so I relocated to Silicon Valley, in the backyard of Facebook, and I started finding individual investors because the venture capital community was already married to Facebook, and, started to build this new platform, started to get advice from Sir Tim Berners-Lee and other, great people about how to build a privacy-first social network that had all the features people loved and none of the BS. So, MeWe took a while, then we did a beta project. First I had to fund it. Then we had to start building it. And building a social network is a personal social network is complex because there are many features. It's not a one-trick pony. And so it took a handful of years. Then you got to make all these features interact together well. You've got to make them scale well. There's so many aspects to it. It doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, and we did it with 40 engineers, not thousands like Facebook and Twitter. I don't know what their engineers do, frankly. We built an award-winning personal social network with 40 engineers, and it grew to 40. We started with 3, and then 4, and then 5, and as we got funded more. So in 2016, MeWe launched at South by Southwest. We had a privacy bill of rights. We had all these great features. And then, as we noticed, Facebook was interfering with us from the beginning. There was a lot of interference. And then it leads us to this question of, well, why doesn't Facebook have all these competitors? Facebook doesn't. TikTok's not a competitor. Twitter's not a competitor. Snap is barely a competitor. The closest, MeWe and Snap are personal social networks, family and friends, where you connect and you're really interacting that way. Of course, you've got groups and pages, stories, all these great things. So MeWe still exists today. So I left 2 years ago. I left actually about 3 years ago, almost now, 2.5. But I handed over the reins in 2001 to the new management team. And then I fully left about 2.5 years ago. MeWe is functioning. They still have about 20 million registered members, a little bit more, maybe close to 21. They haven't been focusing on marketing. They're focusing on a different milieu. It's very hard to compete with Facebook. That's why I provided the FTC with hundreds of pages of documentation of Facebook's interference. And why the answer to the question is, why aren't there more competitors to Facebook for us to choose from? Because Facebook either acquired them or drove them out of business. So this is why the FTC has a big case against Facebook, just like they've just, come to, the court has just ruled in their decision about Google. So, and Michael, the book has a very interesting section. So if you enjoy good stories and entertaining storytelling, Restoring Our Sanity Online has them, because we're going to take a look at the trends of big agriculture, big energy, and big tech. And what's fascinating is all three of these huge segments start with sort of the altruism, the vision, the optimistic visions of the founders of, feeding the community in agriculture, powering, the machines, getting energy to the people in big energy. And in big tech, same thing. It's like, connecting everybody. But what happens is the strong early companies become monopolistic and they lose their ethics. And then it becomes all about the money because now they're shareholders. And then it becomes, ethics are no longer a part of it. It's all about the dollars. Now, what's really interesting, if you track them, and there's some really great stories in here, you'll see then once they become these huge monopolistic entities, now there's a resurrection. It's called restoration agriculture. There's, look at solar power, look at these movements in energy, look at the organic farming movement, not just by, the big companies are late to follow. Remember, they'll start buying the smaller visionary producer, but they're not the ones doing it. So these movements, and now we're seeing a parallel movement in big tech. And that's what Restoring Our Sanity Online is all about. But it's fascinating when you look at the incredible parallels between these monopolistic frameworks.
By the way, where'd you get the name? Because when I saw MeWe, I remember that story about Muhammad Ali that Norman Mailer tells, where he was challenged by a journalist in one of his little poetic rants he does before his fights. What's the world's shortest poem you could think of? And he said, "Me, we."
He was such a great man. I know some of his relatives, but I have to say, the idea of MeWe didn't come from that great champion. It came from the idea. It was really a marketing exercise we all did together with a great marketing leader, Brett Shevak, out of New York City, and we were just throwing things at the wall. What's this company about? And this company is really, what is a personal social network about? Now, it's interesting because if you look back to MySpace, why did MySpace fail? MySpace failed because MySpace was all about me. There was no we. And they weren't savvy enough when they started to sort of break down and lose market share to Facebook, because Facebook was more about the we, the me and the we. And really, authentic social media is about me and my we. And so that's where MeWe came from. And then I went and looked to see if we could get the domain. And luckily, we could get the domain. And luckily, the owner was willing to sell it at a price we could afford, because we couldn't afford $1 million or more for a domain. And I actually wanted to call the company My World. So luckily, I was overruled by my team members, and My World was $1 million to acquire that URL. And MeWe was, less than 10% of that. We still made a deal to pay it over time.
It's a great title. Well, it seems to me that there's three different pieces on the board here for why Facebook is dominant, or Twitter, or why there's only one or two search engines and so on. You end up with duopolies in many industries. So there's the economies of scale. The big boys can just do everything cheaper and they can run at a loss for a long time, and so on. Then there's monopolistic practices that are either quasi-ethical or they're actually illegal. And then there's just the failure of the other companies. MySpace didn't think of we, just me. Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about this because there's interesting effects here, like Pareto distributions in most industries, like that are sometimes called power laws, like a 90-10 power law, where 10% of professional athletes make 90% of the money in any sport. Like professional tennis, we watch this, there's like 1,000 professional tennis players. The top 10 make like 90% of the money. Right. And authors, you and I are authors, 10% of authors sell 90% of the books and so on. That seems to be the case across the board. I was just reading a story in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago about OnlyFans. And there's now like 2 million women on this site that are as content producers. You probably know about this. These are cam girls. But the ones, there are some. I had Ayala on the podcast a few months ago. She's one of the top earners, making 50 to 100,000 a year. And it's like, wow. So people hear this and think, well, I want to get on this. I could put myself through college. It's better than waiting tables at McDonald's or, at some restaurant or whatever. So, but the problem is there's like maybe 1,000 of the 2 million women that make, most 99% of the money. And so on. And I just wonder if this, almost like a law of nature, that's just the way it goes. Even if there's not manipulation or unfair practices by the company, in the case of like Google or Twitter or Facebook, it's free. It's free for me to use. And so of course they have to make money. They have payroll to meet. Your payroll must have been massive, and their payroll is massive on steroids. So if they, what's the alternative? Google charges me a penny a search, or, Twitter charges me $1 a tweet, or, no one's going to do that. So then their question to you is going to be, well, what are we supposed to do? I have payroll to make and I got to pay my rent.
Well, listen, there's a few questions baked in there. Let's go to this idea of, I want to be a social media star. Okay. Because people decide that they're usually young, often they're teens. Now, they're not often thinking about this as a way to pay for college. They're thinking about it as a way not to go to college. Okay. And not intentionally not to go to college, but they're thinking they don't need to go to college because I can be a social media star. Look how easy it is, because they see this and they're encouraged. They see TikTok, they see all these stars, and so they're like, oh, I could do this. But the fact of the matter is, yes, that the percentage of successful stars is tiny. But what happens is, just like with an athlete, parents that are, they're doing club sports. Now, look, that's great. If your kid is totally, keen on a sport, great. But just keep in mind, and a friend of mine gave a speech once to a bunch of CFOs about this. He said, look, there are only, X number of, professional athletes in the United States. I think it's somewhere, it's not large, less than 20,000. And yet, we've got, 500,000 kids in club sports thinking that they're going to be, the next whatever sport you're in. That next great star. It's not going to happen. The odds are against them. So make sure, that you keep your kids focused on their schoolwork and other interests as well. And so here, this idea of social media stars, I mean, it's really a disservice to our youth. So now, interestingly enough, and again, I come back to the book and just flashing the book here because I want people to understand when I say a revolutionary social framework. So part of this is, my friend Raj Sasodi, you mentioned, and John Mackey, they wrote the book together on how John did it at Whole Foods with Raj's help. That was a conscious capitalism endeavor, just like Southwest Airlines, just like the Container Store, just like so many successful companies that people don't realize they're either B Corps or conscious capitalist corps, Patagonia. I mean, there's so many examples. So, but what we want to do here is in this what I call Web 4, everybody's going to get a fair shake. So if you're a user, based on your participation, not just if you're a superstar, but you can share in the revenue. A B Corp, a conscious capitalism company, the users, after all, who makes the money for the platform? Facebook has unbelievable profits. Google has unbelievable profits. They need that much money in net profit? No. Let's share it. Let's make our users part of the experience. Now, it's still, I'm a capitalist through and through. And these are capitalist endeavors, B Corps, conscious capitalism companies, massively successful. So, but let's share. Let's share, based on, I have a formula. We have a user advisory board that helps with the formula for every one of these networks. So you don't have to be a star, but based on your engagement, your content production, your participation, you too. And if you choose to be part of the advertising model, because there are no ads, and that's free, and it was on MeWe, unless you choose to participate in it. So, and there's no targeting, and there's no boosted content. You don't need that stuff. So MeWe broke even. We rolled our revenue model out in 2019. By 2021, we were at break even. So, and that was freemium. Now listen, freemium is a great business model. It works for countless sites. And in this case, what it means is, you give people something free and they have to love it. They have to love what's free. And then you can offer them, additional features. We have a premium service, which means you get a few more features, get some fun extra features. You pay $4.99 a month. Just with that, over a 3-year period of rolling it out, we went to break even. Without venture capital investments, we grew to 20 million people without venture capital investments, but we're stymied because it really, with the kind of service we had and the fact that in the app stores we were rated about 4.5 out of 5 compared to Facebook rated at 2.3 in both, the iTunes and in the, Google store. So clearly there was some interference going on that kept MeWe from getting to 500 million users, so to speak. But anyway, the idea very quickly, Michael, is share the wealth. And then everybody's empowered, and then everybody wants to continue to participate because it's their company too. This is fundamental, very simple economics.
Yeah, I like that. Twitter does that now where we get paid for tweeting or I guess interacting a lot or whatever. I'm not actually sure how it works. I get a couple $100 a month, but I know some people get thousands a month just from Twitter, just from interacting with other people, mostly interacting with comments on tweets that you post. That would be an example, I guess, of what you're talking about.
Yeah, Twitter, Twitter has some really good ideas. Jury of your peers, which I also like when we talk about moderation, so that, it's not just the company deciding, if something, is acceptable or not. Although Twitter now with Musk has become the antithesis of Facebook with Zuckerberg. Twitter seems to be, holding back, mainstream or progressive, New York Times, CNN news, et cetera. And Facebook, of course, has been known to take out conservative accounts and limit, the circulation of those posts. And I'm completely against both of those.
Yeah.
It's like, a site, they're sort of like, what is it, News Nation, this new, news site that's trying to be neutral, just the news. Guys, if you're going to moderate, can you please just moderate neutrally so people can trust that they can see what they want to see without worrying about being too progressive or too conservative and being thrown off your platform, or, having their posts not go to even their friends.
So I have like 250,000 followers on Twitter. How can I tell how many of those are trolls and bots or whatever, fake accounts?
I don't know if you can request. Listen, what is it that Musk? It's well known that Musk, what is it, 70% of his followers maybe are trolls. This is published. President Biden, same thing. It's sort of like, maybe it's easier to judge those. I never actually looked into, can you request Twitter? And then, of course, that
I'm not
if
sure
they're
they
gonna,
know.
well, that's
Because remember when
the
Elon bought X, or bought Twitter, and then all of a sudden he thought maybe 80% of the accounts are trolls or fake accounts or whatever, and he's like, well, it's not worth 50 million, it's only worth 10 million or billion or whatever it was.
well, that's what it's worth now.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I had not bad in the Wall Street Journal right after he bought it. This is a couple years ago. And I wrote, I think the headline was, Elon can fix Twitter and save democracy. Here's how. And
Nice.
I gave him the recipe. I said, keep your politics out, you know, um, keep it, keep it the way it is, get the bots and trolls off. You've got this incredible platform, and people loved Twitter, I'm using past tense there. They loved Twitter because they felt it was the most neutral of all the major platforms. And people went there for news, etc. It's not a personal social network. You're not going there to connect with your family and friends and talk about where you're going for summer vacation. You're going there to get information, follow like-minded people, and learn things that you're curious about. Twitter was a great platform, and now it's a shadow of its former self.
Really? You think so? I still like it, even though I know there's still some issues. What do you see as the problem now?
Well, listen, no question about it. One of the problems is, again, I just think that social media owners are best if they step back. Unless you have True Social and it's clearly this is Donald Trump's platform, he's going to post what he wants. That I get that, and I think that's what Musk turned Twitter into. And so occasionally he makes these tweets that you scratch your head and go, it's kind of like savant like.
Yes.
Maybe he's brilliant at SpaceX and Tesla, but maybe he should, I mean, there's no rhyme or reason
Yeah.
to some of it. And listen, because here we go again, network effect. Michael, you're right. So network effect means that yes, Twitter is still highly functional. Hence, you've got your 250,000 followers, and we don't know if half of them, are bots or not. And you're just not going to find out because here's the thing. I've been a social media executive for a long time, everybody, over 25 years. Social media companies don't want to get rid of the bots and trolls
Right. Right.
because they get to count them as members. They get to charge more for advertising. Their members think they have more followers, and it makes them all look good.
Yeah.
This is why we need a revolution. This is why the established companies are not going to change this. We need a revolutionary social framework. It's really not so revolutionary. It's common sense. This is why all media outlets will interview me, from Fox to the LA Times, CNN and Wall Street Journal, LA Times, and Newsmax. I mean, because Michael, my message is common sense. It's just that, I don't have a special interest backing me up. I don't have a political agenda, nor is it my job to have one if we're going to make social media for the people.
Well, I love the idea of conscious capitalism, and particularly if it's voluntary. And John Mackey, as a libertarian, isn't suggesting the government come in and regulate companies and force them to be consciously capitalistic. But so what do you do with companies like maybe Zuckerberg says, yeah, nah, we're not doing that. Sorry.
You know, I had an interesting op-ed recently in the Hill because Donald Trump during the campaign mentioned one day, and Business Insider covered this, that he was going to put Mark Zuckerberg in jail if he was elected president. And
Right.
it's like, I wrote this op-ed, and basically, look, the simple summary is, well, if you're going to put Zuckerberg in jail, then you got to put Musk in jail and yourself in jail, for Truth Social, because, the First Amendment protects all of you guys. And yeah, it's not savory that, Zuckerberg is doing what he's doing over at Facebook. And of course, what's interesting is 2 days after Trump said that, Facebook released all restrictions on Trump's posting on Facebook. The next day after that, Musk announced that he's going to back Trump with $45 million a month. I mean, it's just fascinating, this whole
It's
game.
crazy. Yeah.
And who are the victims? We are the people.
Yeah.
Can we just have social media that's unbiased, that, moderation's important? You gotta have moderation, because sites that don't have moderation are untenable. Good people, no matter what side of the equation you're on, we can't
Like
tolerate
4chan
sites.
and 8chan and those crazy
Yeah,
sites.
yeah. No, HN. Listen, it's disgusting. You can't you can't go on. I mean, we can't tolerate it. It's just not possible. So it's important that we have, even-handed, fair moderation, and that, also that we have mechanisms for, like user advisory boards and jury of your peers, so that people can really, question the moderation that they're receiving. And this is where we want to take this industry. We want to get it back. Yeah, it's funny, just like with big energy and big ag, we're moving forward by restoring the original vision. So, and that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And of course, using the latest technology. So it's not really a step back. We're not going to go driving Model T. No, we're going to drive the latest Lamborghini in social media, but it's going to be the right one. It's going to do what you ask it to do. It's not going to offend you. It's not going to spy on you. It's not going to target you. It's not going to manipulate you. It's not going to sell you down the river. It's not going to provide information to your employers, and everybody else about who you are and where you've been and where you're going.
Right. So I'd also like Twitter's community notes, which is good, and the Twitter files, where Elon turned over all those millions of emails to Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and Michael Schellenberger, and they uncovered all this shenanigans going on before the 2020 election, suppressing, for example, of the Hunter Biden laptop story. And that so on the one hand, that was a disturbing story. Like, this was going on behind the scenes. Yes. But on the other hand, it's positive because, well, we know, because Elon said, I'm turning all these files over. So would you suggest some kind of transparency like that for these corporations, or some kind of more regulation where regulators come in and look through the files like that to see what things are going on that might manipulate elections, for example?
We know what's happening right now. And so here's the thing. When you've got, 100 million trolls, bots and trolls on a platform, and they're coming out of these bot and troll farms around the world that are being funded by adversarial entities, it's going to be hard. So, it's interesting, again, coming to the book, what we've got to do is come up with a formula to, instead of symptomatically addressing it, we've got to get bots and trolls out of the game. Now, if they can't boost, there's an appendix in the back, by the way, on getting bots and trolls out. It's Appendix D. So, it's a 7-point, plan, but it's pretty straightforward. So, the first thing is you just stop, the here, I'm going to let you eliminate boosted posts.
Yep.
User ID verification. Imagine, and sure, there's going to be a lot of gaming of that, but, you're going to be able to verify. If this guy says it's John Smith, we're going to have comprehensive user ID verification. We're not going to be invasive about it. We're going to eliminate boosted posts, because If the bot and troll can't boost anything, then they're going to be more likely to go somewhere else where they can. Why are they going to stay on your site? I
Okay,
might
hang
order.
on. Hey, before you go to the next one.
Yes, sir.
So, user ID, like something like a driver's license or passport number, but what if it's a minor? They don't have a driver's license.
Well, this is where we've got to, come up with a system, and either it's a private system that's certified by the government, because the government has to make sure it's not gaming the system, or it's got to be the government. Remember, the government already has everybody here's social security number. The data ecosystem already knows who's real and who's not. They're just not revealing, oh, that's a bot and that's, you know. And of course, we can also use AI, but we're going to have a real user ID system that I've been opposed to. There have been government initiatives going back 15 years on this that I was opposed to. But it's time. We need to know, is that really a 12-year-old, or is that a 50-year-old pretending to be a 12-year-old? And
Right.
that person needs to be reported right now to the authorities. And they should, we've got to filter them out. We've got to filter them out. We've got to make sure that we save our kids. This is critical. The mental health and the well-being of our children is the future of our country. And at the same time, disagreement is the backbone of democracy. So we've got to come back to civil discourse. We don't really hate each other, Michael, in this country, but the bots and trolls are doing their very best through these adversarial countries and entities to make us hate each other. I mean, it's incredible. Some of the most popular sites on Facebook claiming to be Black owned or, conservative owned. It turns out in the investigations, no, these are owned by adversarial countries. Look at the reports last week on Russia's interference. They're so sophisticated now. They found a conservative platform in this example, and then they're funneling money into the conservative platform. The conservative platform has no idea that it's foreign money, no idea. And the conservative platform is paying its, creators to create content based on ideas that's being fed by the foreign adversaries. We've got to stop this.
Yeah. And who should do that? The companies themselves, or are they going to really need the government to lean in on them?
Well, user ID verification will at least get us to the point where we're going to have a keen sense of who it is that's posting. And by the way, in Web 4, this what I call restoration networking, you can still have an avatar. That's not a problem. You want to be anonymous with, while you're posting online, fine. But the company will know who you are because they had to use user ID verification to verify your account to be on their platform at all. So you can you can have that anonymity as long as you keep it clean. And, you're not chasing, a minor, and you're not, trying to incite violence or hatred, but whatever. Avatars are fine because some people want to, engage that way. But once you, sort of break the rules, well, the site always knows who you are. So that's the protective mechanism.
Okay. And then Twitter, Facebook, are they publishers like the New York Times, or are they more platforms like a telephone company?
Listen, everybody, Michael's asking a really great question because if they're publishers, it's a different regulation. They come under different laws. And in this case, I would say, and I think the courts are probably going to rule this way, they're not publishers, even though, here's the asterisk, that about 40% of American members of Facebook get their news on Facebook. So, and yet at the same time, because they are a personal social network, and that's going to carry the day. And I think, again, Michael, now here's the other piece. There's some big pieces here we haven't talked about. Data portability. Just remember that, or data interoperability, but that's a bigger, longer word. You can muck that one up. So imagine a world where the free market works, and they're competitors to Facebook and to Twitter and to Google, etc. And you control your content. Your content is in what's called a pod. Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, his team at Solid has invented these things called pods. So all your data is no longer stored up in the cloud, on Facebook, et cetera. No, your data is controlled by you in these pods that are also hosted somewhere, but you have complete control, and the data infrastructure doesn't get into it. Now, if you get pissed off at Facebook or you're offended or you're just done with it, you'll pull down all your content and you walk. You go somewhere else, and then you upload your content somewhere else. It's that easy. Data interoperability. So this is where the government has to step in. And I know the FTC is looking at this in whatever settlement they might make with Facebook around the antitrust. So a few years ago, Facebook tried to gamify interoperability by doing it with Facebook, Twitter, Microsoft, maybe Google. 4 companies that didn't compete with each other. They would have data interoperability between themselves. It was a complete sham, and they never did anything about it. But real data interoperability, and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, has invented a great system. Then, the government also needs to get the free market working again, because, there's a lot of entrepreneurs who would jump in, but right now the network effect, they're like, I'm going to get crushed. So there are things we can do, in what I call Web 4. We haven't talked about Web 3 yet. Restoring our sanity online. We got to get to this, everybody. Remember, the printing press took, a few hundred years to sort out before, they were able then to filter out truth, fact, fiction, and get ourselves back into some kind of sanity. But technology moves much faster. We can do this much faster.
Yeah. All right, go ahead and bring us up to speed on Web 3 and then what you're proposing for Web 4.
So, listen, Web 3, and most of you, I'm sure, if you've heard of Web 3, chances are you have no idea what it is. It's not really well defined, but I can tell you that part of the definitions of Web 3 is that it's what we call decentralized, that it's built on the blockchain, and that there's cryptocurrency behind it and used as a medium of exchange on the sites of Web3. And in the case of social media sites on Web3, it's used to help moderate, help upvote, downvote, etc., posts and things like that. Now, Web3 is interesting, and that all sounds really good, right? But there's some problems. For social media in particular, it hasn't been proven to scale very well at all, because blockchain is super slow, guys. And when you've got billions of, messaging transactions, packets going up and down throughout, it doesn't work. It doesn't scale very well for the kind of technology that's needed for social networking and personal social networking, which is why you haven't seen it. Also, the idea that we would monetize our relationships, by upvoting and downvoting all the posts. I mean, social media users in the mainstream aren't really interested in that. What we're interested in is communicating with our family and friends, like-minded people we want to follow. We're not interested in putting a post up. We're not all creators. Just a minor fraction of us are creators. The rest of us are consumers. So we have no interest in cheapening our relationships by monetizing, our relationship with our family and friends. It's really kind of ghastly. So, and then the other piece is that it's the billionaires who are behind Web 3, who are behind Web 2. So there's a chapter in the book. You guys will love it. There's 3 chapters on Web 3 in the book. And there's a chapter called Meet Your New Boss, same as your old boss.
As the old boss. Yeah.
And so that's Web 3. So listen, Web 3 has a lot of promise, but the reality is Web 3 has been around a long time. There have been social networks in it for a long time. Most have failed, and the ones that are still there are, they can't scale. So you're not going to have 100 million people or 500 million people or 50 million people necessarily on a Web3 social platform. The experience isn't good enough, and people are not interested in cheapening their relationships through monetization. It will work for a lot of other applications. So it can work in the finance industry. It can work in a lot of other applications. It can work for verification systems, all kinds of things. It can work, lots of things. And UNICEF uses blockchain technology. But we want to be, and no one's cracked that nut. Even Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web, whose team worked on blockchain technology for a long time, says, guys, it ain't going to work, not for social media. Web 4, which is something I introduced in the book because, we're just barely getting into Web 3, but we've just got to leapfrog past Web 3. And Web 4 is really the medium that captures, first of all, you can use cryptocurrency in Web 4. I mean, crypto's around, so why not use it as, with fiat, with, your dollars as a medium of currency? Sites can certainly use that. You can have a crypto wallet. You can have your wallet for fiat also. You can acquire services. You can do things like that. You can use crypto. But Web 4 is very much built on this model of, there's no boosted posting, timeline news feeds. It's a business model that's based on the highly successful and highly ethical, authentic models of conscious capitalism and B Corps. It's really, it's great. And there's so much authenticity in it. But you can follow, you can do pages, you can be a great creator. And if you're a creator, you're going to get your fair share. So, Michael, your fair share of Twitter might be and is likely to be a lot more than what you're getting. Because they have this purported model, but, the lion's share is going to them. And after all, they're in trouble. They're not going to share a lot with you right now because, he needs to figure out how to make money over there. Because, Musk has lost so many of its advertising base.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Web 4 is really interesting. It protects our youth. It protects our sanity. It gets rid of bots and trolls. Also, it uses AI very effectively. And remember, AI is a tattletale, not your friend. So if you've got an AI friend going, wherever you're using AI, it's just feeding the data ecosystem. So whatever you're asking about, and if you're on Snap and you've got your AI friend and Facebook, where you've got you've got these all new, the AI friends. Soon we're going to have stuffed animals that are AI friends. Well, where's all that data going? Every conversation that you have, because, how's it being programmed to respond? It's all connected to your Wi-Fi, to the web, ultimately to the data ecosystem, because you've got to check those boxes or it's not going to function. So, but we can use AI in a smart way. And we can use open source technology, open source code in a smart way. So we can incentivize our users to help make sure that we wipe out bots and trolls on a restoration network. And there's, the restoration network has its own constitution. We've articulated in the book. There are a lot of critical things. But also, if you love great stories, Michael, the book has, it's 200 pages start to finish. So it's an easy read, including these appendices on, how do we, supercharge the revenue, get rid of bots and trolls, all these things. But it's filled with great stories. I'll give you one. You may have heard of this, or you may remember it. These are facts, by the way. I'm a factual guy. So there's 420 footnotes in here. So everything I write about has been researched carefully, and the footnotes of highly credible sources. But Michael, people probably have forgotten, especially in this country. Did you know that Facebook once, just a few years ago, asked every Australian Facebook member to send in a naked picture of themselves to Facebook so that Facebook could create a database of every Australian, the naked photo of all the Australians, so that Facebook could wipe out the revenge porn that some people were using on Facebook in Australia. People get pissed off at their former boyfriend or girlfriend and start throwing naked pictures on it. Facebook's solution, I promise you, you can't make this stuff up. And this stuff, the book is full of jaw-dropping stuff like this. You can't make it up. Brings just tears to my eyes. It's hilarious. Their solution was to tell everybody in Australia, send us a naked picture, we'll create this big database, and then we'll match it against all the naked pictures being posted. Well, do you think the Australians were keen on that? No. Talk about another bad idea. Oh my God, they would have had this database of naked pictures of the Australians. It would have ended up on the dark web. The whole world would have had it.
All right, so you have a nice summary of some of the studies done on the problem of teens today with depression, anxiety, and cutting and suicidal ideation and so on. Question is why is there this spike? So people like Jonathan Haidt, accuse social media, screen time in general, social media in particular, less time outdoors and so forth, less time interacting with real people, and so on. Give us the pluses and minuses. Do a balance sheet here for that and where you stand on that debate.
I think Jonathan's right. John researches very carefully. John's a professor. He researches everything extraordinarily carefully. I ran a full page ad with MeWe in the New York Times in 2018. And, I said, listen, why are you targeting 14-year-olds and manipulating their body images and creating a lot of suicidal thoughts? I mean, if you look at the studies, there was a Facebook whistleblower just last year who said they have massive amounts of data, on, the impact on kids, Instagram, and the negative body shaming, body image issues that they're creating, the bullying, the sense of belonging or not belonging, and also, Sweden, right? I think Sweden just, passed a new law. Their pediatricians, that they don't want any kids to see a screen for the first 2 years of their lives. The screen's addictive. Now, look, we've all seen this. When TV, listen, we love, we sit in front of our TVs. What do you think it does to our kids? What do you think it does to our babies? It might be convenient to give your phone to your baby. It's actually a huge mistake to do that. The screen is addictive. Give a book to them. Let them chew on the book. Let them eat the book. Give them a book. Surround them with books and toys and keep your phones away from them. Do your best not to use phones around them. Make sure as your kids grow up, this movement where schools are banning phones in the school system, you can't use your phone, keep it in your backpack or don't bring it to school. This is great. This is vastly needed. Kids need to recall that face-to-face is where it's at. They need to get exercise. Remember this whole epidemic around obesity. Part of it is not just the sugar and the junk food. It's that kids aren't active. So, you've got to now listen, I'm a dad. I have kids. We've got to do this. And remember, kids see phones. Go to a restaurant with a kid. I'm sorry, everybody. It might be a little inconvenient at first. Until your kids learn, they learn quickly. They're not getting the phone. They're not getting the phone. Once you keep your word and you just make that the rule, they line right up. My kids have been great about that, but we had to teach them right away. You're not getting the phone. No way. It's not an option. Then they just, they're great. So we've just got to take care of this. John Haidt is right. And this is also where restoration networking comes in, because we're talking about authentic communicating. We're talking about not being targeted. There are whole guidance chapters in here on what you can do right now as a parent with your kids. I'm really keen on this. Now, there's also a chapter on surprise. Social media can be good for your mental health. So, and there's a chapter called Saving Our Kids from the Abyss, because the phone, social media, this is an abyss. If you put your kid on TikTok for the first time or Instagram, what you're going to see in their news feed, it's jaw-dropping. It's disgraceful. It's disgusting. It's wrong. If you're in China and you put your kid on the equivalent TikTok's, equivalent in China, you're going to see STEM. Your kids are going to want to become astronauts. They're not going to want to become social media stars.
Yeah. All right, Mark, just last subject here. I met the Google guys back in 1998, I think it was, at this Adventures of the Mind for advanced high school kids. Bunch of speakers, Larry and Sergey were there long before their IPO, and they were talking about what they had plans to do. And it was like, oh my God, these guys are going to change the world. They're like Thomas Edison. They're like Elon now, right? We're going to have self-driving cars. We're going to go to Mars. And it's like, wow, I love this. And don't be evil, right? Isn't that the motto? Don't be evil. Yeah. All right. So what happened? And so I guess there'll be stuff we find out in this lawsuit against them for monopolistic practices. But beyond the efficiency of capturing the market early and being dominant, economies of scale and all that, and the failure of other companies to compete with them because they just couldn't do it, the actual illegal or immoral, evil activities that they do, how far do they go? I don't know if you saw the Rogan episode last week with Robert Epstein, who I kind of know. He's psychologist, Harvard trained, Psych Today editor, and so on. And he's done a lot of research on Google, and he claims that they purposely censor against regular fair competition. I mean, they do it like illegally. And then he went really far. I mean, he went on like he thinks they're targeting him to kill him. They think his wife died in a car accident, and he now thinks maybe it was not an accident. Maybe Google was behind it. And it was the more he talked, the kind of loonier it sounded. But the first part, that they manipulate things and that the effects of their activities on elections, that seemed completely plausible to me. How they manipulate news feed and so forth. What do you know? What do you think they're up to, if anything, and what could we do about it?
Well, I think we could look back to Tim Cook's battle with them. Tim Cook, who has really, we should remember this, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, is a great American hero when it comes to privacy. He's been more quiet about it in the last couple of years, but I mean, he fought with the FBI. He refused to, crack the encryption on an iPhone.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, that was all just staged anyhow, because the FBI could just hire a hacker to crack that phone. But don't do no evil, don't be evil. They deep sixed that in 2018. So, it's no longer part of their mantra. They very carefully just kind of buried that. Early on, it was, it was a way to encourage trust. And I think they believed that, early on. But again, what happens is Google became such a monopoly. And if you look at the decision by the courts in the antitrust case, I mean, Google, boxed people out. Google locked up deals even with Apple. They locked up so Apple used their search engine. Everybody used their search engine. Therefore, I mean, they just boxed out competition. I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I am a libertarian. But, I believe in a free market that's, helped by the government to make sure that it's functioning properly, that antitrust is enforced. I believe in capitalism. And, Google, some of these companies just get too big. And then, it's almost natural, the evolution, as we talk about in the book, then they start to box everybody out. They can't help it. They have all the money to make the deals. It's like, it becomes a business decision instead of an ethical decision. So there are plenty of ways to make money ethically. Again, restoring our sanity online, I think we address this. It's not about everybody's bad and evil. It's sort of like, we already know that story. How about let's now go to the next generation, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. Let's get to Web 4, and let's get the solar power working. Let's get organic farming working. Let's get B Corps and, conscious capitalism companies, and let's get boosting and targeting and manipulating and bots and trolls out of the game. Let's protect our kids. Let's make sure we're using great technology. I love social media. I'm one of the guys who invented the whole thing. We called them community portals in the 90s. We didn't call them social media. But let's get it working the way it was intended. Keep us connected authentically so that we could nurture our relationships, so that we could feel more love, more connection, so we could find like-minded people or new ideas that we're curious about, or somebody we want to go riding our bikes with. Let's have social media the way it was intended, And that's what we've got to do. We've got to build the future and some of the, look, some of the stuff, Web3 has pieces that fit into Web4. Web2 has pieces that fit in. Surveillance capitalism, sorry, it's got to go.
Yeah. Well, I hope you make this happen, Mark, because we need it. I mean, I'm an old baby boomer. I don't really get the Facebook stuff. I don't really use that. But on Twitter, I kind of get it now because they have this. In addition to the people you follow, there's For You. I don't even remember when they added that, but all of a sudden, and now that Elon allows videos, I could sit there for hours watching these videos. They're hilarious. There's the Darwin Award type videos like, hold my beer while I jump off the roof and try to make it to the pool. And then, hilarity ensues. And there's thousands of those. And fights, guys getting into fights. And then this guy, Steve Inman, narrates the fight like it's an MMA fight. It's just, and you could just go on for hours. And I think, I am just wasting my time. This is incredible.
Look, it's like sugar. Sugar, a doctor friend of mine recently said, and I don't know if this is true, but he said sugar is more addictive than caffeine or heroin. Mm. The screen is massively addictive. We know this just from watching television. Yeah. So that's why we were given rules when we were kids. It was all the screen anyhow. We were given rules about how long we could be on the phone. So in a certain way, it hasn't changed. We just need our guideposts, but also when we were kids, and remember, ads, advertisements. So kids, until they're about 14, believe everything they see in an advertisement is true. And that doesn't matter whether it was 25 years ago or today. So we've really got to be careful about what our kids are getting. And today, more than ever, we need to teach our kids how to critically think.
We got to restore our sanity online. There we go. Get it? It's a great book, big read. I enjoyed it very much. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for talking to me. Thanks for your work, especially, is really important.
Thank you, Michael.